Stop what you're doing because today we're going to answer our most asked question, Cricut or sublimation. We have been teaching both of these techniques on our channel for years at this point. So today I'm going to go through all of the pros and cons and we're going to determine which one will be right for you. The first thing I want to do before we start talking about the pros and cons is I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, what exactly do you want to make? When I'm asking you this question, I want you to think, do you want to create party invites or party favors or apparel such as t-shirts, hoodies, things like that? You really need to determine what exactly you are planning on making or some of the things you want to make, and then we will go from there. Number 2 is how much time do you want to or have to dedicate to making certain projects? Now, stick around to the end and you're going to understand why I asked this question. However, I want you to just jot down how much time you want to spend on these projects. And then number 3, the last question I want you to ask yourself is, are you tech savvy? Now, since you've asked yourself those questions and you've written down your answers, let's go ahead and jump into all of the pros and cons between Cricut and sublimation. Now, before we jump into the pros and cons, I want to give a brief explanation about the difference between Cricut and sublimation and what they both do, and then we will talk about all the pros and cons with both. So to start out with, let's talk about Cricut. For those that may not know, Cricut is a die cutting machine that you see here on our craft table, and it comes with different blades depending on what machine you get. For example, the majority of people are going to cut adhesive vinyl, heat transfer vinyl, and paper on these machines. However, if you get a Maker or a Maker 3, they have what they call adaptive blades, meaning you can cut an even wider range of materials on your machine, such as basswood. You can use a rotary blade to cut fabric, thicker materials, and so many other things. Now, sublimation, you are going to use either a sublimation printer or a converted EcoTank printer. And what this is going to do is you are going to create your designs on your computer. So once you have printed your design, you are then going to take it and press it onto your substrate or your blank. And what happens is when you add it on top of your blank and then you press it with your heat press, the heat plus the pressure activates the dye ink. It turns it from a solid to a gas, and then those gases adhere to the polymers on or in your blank. So now that we've kind of gone over the basics about what these two are, let's talk about the pros and cons. I want to start out with the pros, and let's start out with the pros with sublimation. So the first thing with sublimation that I absolutely adore is the fact that it is extremely permanent. Once that ink has locked into the polymers on your blank, it's not going anywhere. It is there to stay. You can't wash it out. It may fade over time, but it is locked in and it is going nowhere. The other thing that I love about sublimation is it is as easy as print and press. Now, you will take some time designing what you want to press, or there are so many pre-made designs out there that you can just purchase, print, and press, and it takes no time at all. So I do love that it is super easy. You print and press and done, and that's it. So I count that as a pro for sublimation. This next pro is kind of going to piggyback off of what I just said about how it's just as easy as printing and pressing. But the next pro is it is so less time consuming than creating something with your Cricut, because like I said, all you have to do is print it, press it for 60 seconds or so, and you're good to go. Another thing is there is no downtime between making your project versus using it, whereas with the Cricut machine, especially with HTV and like printable HTV, sometimes you have to give that material 24 to 48 hours to really set in. So I do love that there is no wait time. As soon as you press it and as soon as your project is done, you can either wear it or use it without the fear of it being ruined. Now let's talk about the pros with your Cricut machine. First thing that I absolutely adore is the fact that you can use so many different materials on your Cricut versus you are limited to what materials you can use when you are sublimating. For example, like I said earlier, you can cut lots of different materials on here, plus the range of what you can make is a little bit more expanded. You can see on our channel all of the different things that we do make with our Cricut. So I do like having my options, whether I want to make an invitation and print it and cut it, or I want to make stickers, which you can make stickers with Sublimation. You just also have to have a Cricut to cut those out. So if you're just picking between one or the other, know that it is doable to make Sublimation stickers, but to cut them out, you either have to hand cut them or have a die cutting machine to cut it for you. So I do love having the option with the Cricut that I know I can make stickers instantly. There's so many other things that you can make. You can make stencils to paint with your Cricut. The possibilities really are unlimited with this machine versus with Sublimation, you are very limited to the types of materials you can use. Some other things that you could do with your Cricut that you can't with Sublimation are etch on acrylic, which I love. You can also etch on metal like necklaces and things like that if you have a maker, or you can also cut very thin wood veneer on both the Explore and the Maker series to give you a faux wood effect, which I really, really like. That obviously you can't do with Sublimation. You are also not limited to the fabrics that you use if you're making shirts with HTV or printable HTV. So with Sublimation, you only can use white or light colored shirts. With Cricut, you can use white HTV or printable HTV and really put that on any shirt. Just know that it's not going to be as long lasting and as permanent as Sublimation. So it's kind of a toss up depending on what types of materials you like, or if you want it super permanent. Some people do not like the feel of polyester shirts. Some people love it. So if that's you and you love it, Sublimation may be the way to go. If you don't and you're sticking more toward the cotton, then you may be more on the Cricut side using HTV and printable HTV. Now I know I have touched on some of the cons, but let's really do a deep dive into the cons with Sublimation and Cricut. Starting with Sublimation, obviously one of the cons that I just mentioned was the fact that you are limited to the types of materials. So like I said, some people are really gonna like polyester, some people hate the way that it feels. Just know that your t-shirt does have to have a high polyester count unless you are going to use sublimatable HTV. So you're kind of combining the two. With that process, you still have to have a Cricut to cut out your design and then press on it. So just know if you just have a Sublimation printer, you are limited to the types of materials that you can press on. Another con with Sublimation is you must get your color profiles right. Now, we have a Sublimation course if Sublimation is the way that you want to go. It is linked down below. Definitely click that link and check it out. But depending on what kind of printer you have and what type of ink, you have to get your color profiles right. Otherwise, the colors are going to print different than what is on the screen. It can be very tricky with those color profiles. You're gonna have to play around with them. And I'm gonna say that is a con just because it is as easy as printing and pressing. However, you do have to spend some time on the front end of things, making sure you find the right color profiles for your printer and your ink. But if you're interested in Sublimation, we will walk you through all of that in our Sublimation course and explain to you which inks that we like and give you the color profiles that we have found works best for us. Another con with Sublimation is the fact that you must print at least once a week, if not once every other week. Otherwise, your Sublimation printer is going to have more of a chance to clog. And once that clogs, it is going to be extremely hard to unclog that. You have to go through a long process to get that unclogged. Just know that if you're not planning on using your Sublimation printer at least once every other week, more so once a week, that you are gonna run the risk of that becoming clogged and then have to go through the process. So because of that, in my opinion, that is going to fall under the con side for me, just because with a Cricut, if I decide I don't want to mess with this for 2 months, I can come back 2 months later and not have an issue. Now let's talk about the cons with Cricut. I have said it once and I'll say it again. One of the biggest cons between these two is the fact that what you do on your Cricut, especially if you are doing apparel like shirts and things, HTV is not going to have the lifespan of a sublimated shirt. So just keep that in mind. There are lots of other instructions if you are making shirts with HTV, such as turning your shirt inside out, washing it on cold water, hanging it to dry. There's just a lot more steps when it comes to making shirts, hoodies, and different types of apparel with your Cricut versus with Sublimation. So I do think it is a con that it is not as permanent, so that fell in the con side for me. Same with adhesive vinyl. Adhesive vinyl also has a shelf life. If you prep your blank and you put it on like you should and not put your stuff in the dishwasher, you should be fine with your permanent vinyl. Just know that, once again, just like with HTV, adhesive vinyl has a life of about 7 years or so. So it's not something that you're going to create an heirloom piece with adhesive vinyl, but I also don't think that adhesive vinyl and HTV were made to be heirloom pieces per se. Just know that it is a little less permanent on your Cricut than if you sublimated it. Another con with Cricut is it can be time consuming, especially if you are wanting to create something intricate. It does take your machine quite some time to not only cut, but once it is cut, you're gonna have to weed your design depending on what it is. So that is time consuming. Some people love it and think that weeding is therapeutic. Some people absolutely hate it. So that's why you have to decide what you like, what you don't like, and then choose from there. So with all of those pros and cons that we touched on today, what do you think is going to be best for you? Let's circle back to those questions that I asked at the first of the video, and that is, what do you want to make? How much time do you have to dedicate to this craft? And finally, are you tech savvy? Now you understand why I asked those questions, because depending on how much time you want to dedicate to your craft, if you have a little bit more time, you want something that takes up a little bit more time, Cricut, in my opinion, is the way to go. Because like I said, some people find weeding therapeutic and things like that. Just know that if you make something with your Cricut, it may take a little more time than with Sublimation. And then finally, the last question, are you tech savvy? I feel like you have to be at least somewhat tech savvy to do Sublimation, just because of those color profiles. You have to be good with working with printers and not get frustrated working with printers, because you are gonna have a time. It is doable, it is easy. Like I said, we have a course that's gonna walk you through step by step and hold your hand through the process of getting your printer, setting it up, and making your first project. So we're gonna take all that headache out of it, but there are gonna be times where you may run into issues and you still have issues with your printer after you've already learned exactly how to do things and know how to do things. So that's why I ask, are you tech savvy? In my opinion, Cricut is more for the person who may not be as tech savvy. But another thing with Cricut is there is a learning curve. We do have a membership where you can sign up. We are going to walk you through, once again, learn your Cricut, learn the terminology, all of that stuff. We have something for everyone. So if you were to ask me right now which one I would choose, and I want you to leave a comment down below which one you would choose. But in my opinion, if I had to choose between Sublimation and Cricut today, right now, honestly, guys, I'm gonna go with Cricut. And that's just because I have so many more things that I can create. I'm the type of person, I get FOMO really bad, and I want to create anything and everything. I personally feel like I'm limited a little bit with Sublimation. I do still adore Sublimation. I do use Sublimation. We love it here in this office, but if it was right now, I had to make a decision, which one am I taking with me? It's gonna be Cricut. Make sure you like this video, give this a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell notification so that you can get notified every time we get crafty. Plus, leave me a comment down below, which one would you choose?